In a world of instant messaging, instant connection, and instant gratification, what could we lose in the search for more? Well, everything. The core of what I want to talk about is how engaging with the media changes our perceptions of the world around us, as well as how it shapes our internal selves. As time goes on, change is inevitable, and with that change comes the development of new cultural pillars and symbols. Examining some of these over the years and diving into specific cultural genres like philosophical content, bro content, memes, and etc. can help us examine the development of culture over time. In every aspect of our lives, there's some technology that we're around. Within this sort of technological bubble, everything becomes influenced by and molded by technology. From the way that we eat to the way that we wash our hands, all is externally influenced. Because we are a social species, we have to take things in from our peers and our environment to increase our inevitability of survival and acceptance. However, because our world is increasingly digital, the digital influences become far more prevalent, potent, and far-reaching. It's important to talk about this because in our everyday lives, we probably don't even notice how we are being influenced by technology. It's a very passive thing, which makes it all the more dangerous if not careful. It becomes increasingly easier to find yourself becoming radicalized inside of a digital echo chamber with algorithms leading the charge. I aim to find ways to combat this, or at the very least, engage in a critical way that allows for increased awareness after the fact. Over time, it seems as though we as a populace have trended towards more digital media rather than physical media. We've traded out movie rental stores for Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, and the same goes for video games as well. In fact, the newest PS5 consoles have an entirely digital version in which physical copies of the game are now literally defunct. Instead, you upload your digital save data, if you still possess it, and the game transfers the data to the now downloaded game. The issue with both of these concepts is the inherent lack of ownership over any of these things. I've personally encountered the issue this year where, due to an error, I had my PlayStation account banned, and since all of my data was tied to the account, all of that was gone as well. It instilled a deep panic that I may have lost access to the things that I had worked so hard to attain, and all of the fun moments that I had engaged in and captured using the in-system capture features. Luckily though, I was able to get back into my account and retrieve all of my stuff. However, the idea that it can all just be taken away in an instant really stuck with me, and has now re-emerged due to a similar issue with Pinterest. As of a few weeks ago, Pinterest has begun mass banning users for at best verifiably minimal offenses. Many theories have been thrown out, but one that really stuck out to me was about Pinterest saving itself by mass banning bot accounts due to recent lawsuits and upcoming Q1 reviews and audits. It's not beyond belief that investor pressures as well as legislative ones would push the company to such extremes. I say all of this to emphasize the fact that we don't really own anything anymore. From modern entertainment subscription services to the original subscription services of taxes, healthcare, rent, mortgages, and car payments, we've been on a trend of losing ownership over even our own news media and basic services like food and banking. On the topic of trends, trend cycles are incredibly prevalent in the modern media landscape. Through the introduction of the all-powerful, all-knowing algorithm, the ways in which we are presented media and interact with it have fundamentally changed. New trending songs, dances, and memes now propagate and die within weeks as the speed of trends continues to pick up. There's also been an influx of hyper-specific trend-based content like asking, "What are we wearing this season?" which I had personally never seen before, but TikTok became a thing. Now, this is no marker of proof, as I haven't been the most fashion-conscious person, but it seems like trendy clothing has moved online in the place of magazines and television. This algorithmic adaptation has led to changes in how we create art as well. Artists can no longer just be artists and also have to now be content creators. There's a recent influx of so-called content farms run by artists to increase engagement with music by using popular videos and clips with their music as the backing. The idea that we must follow trends in order to draw attention to our art is incredibly dystopian, especially with art's history as groundbreaking, genre-defying, and countercultural. We have entered an age where engagement is more important than art is. This concept bleeds into rage bait tactics where people post terrible music on purpose to drive engagement. Algorithms push negativity because they get more interactions. The algorithm curates music based on pre-established listener bases, leaving new artists out to dry unless they pay for promotion.
Somewhere along the way, talking about art turned into trying to win an argument. It's not enough just to like something anymore. You've got to be able to defend it in a courtroom debate on X or Discord or whatever other social platform.
Through the polarization of a perspective, things must fall into two opposing baselines of either objectively good or objectively bad. With this, there comes a tremendous lack of thought when it comes to analyzing things.
These two comments are on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum, but both lack any thought or critical thinking, and that is the state of music discourse in 2025. Why didn't you like that album? Me. Something you don't like is popular? Overrated. They're creative, but you don't like it? Corny. It's to the point where people just turn their brains off to follow the norms and trends for free likes.
A 2010 study found that empathy levels of American college students had dropped 40%, which some researchers attribute to the rise of social media and, by proxy, echo chambers. An echo chamber is described by the Cambridge Dictionary as a situation in which people only hear opinions of one type or opinions that are similar to their own. In the past, in-person discussions like town halls were a healthy medium for cross-aisle conversations because people had to listen to each other even when they disagreed. In the age of the algorithm, we create our own echo chamber bubbles around our personal views and interests without even trying, which is even scarier. Most people fail to even realize this effect until they engage with others, which really drives home the importance of in-person contact. In less recent years, social platforms had yet to fine-tune the amount of interaction among the disagreeing groups. Now, with the knowledge that we can completely avoid things that we don't wish to see or hear, things as minuscule as even opposing views on a television show or song, we push ourselves towards more microcosms of agreement, or colloquially, echo chambers. I examined a study of the effect of echo chambers on interaction across 3 separate social media platforms, Douyin, TikTok, and Bilibili. Echo chambers were quantified through selective exposure and homophily. Selective exposure is a social phenomenon where a user consumes only that which reinforces their pre-existing beliefs. This is an undeniable and an unavoidable facet of algorithm-dominated social media, wherein all media is that which a user would be most likely to engage with, leading to entrenchment of beliefs, othering of differing perspectives, and bigotry on both sides of the ideological spectrums. Homophily is defined as the tendency of individuals to tend towards groups with similar views and/or ideological tendencies. Gao is quoted, "Social media has 3 main features that make it the perfect environment for echo chambers. No geographical restrictions, no social cost to sharing fringe beliefs, and fellow believers that can be found no matter how fringe. These features magnify and normalize what would otherwise be erratic behavior or beliefs. For example, the idea of the black pill, in which believers have surrendered their will to the idea that they must adapt incel-based beliefs which take incredibly sexist and misogynistic views towards women, sometimes directly translating to real-world violence." Another examination performed by Allison Martingano and researchers at the University of Wisconsin developed similar results. Quote, "The more social media people reported using, the lower their levels of empathy. This trend did not vary much according to the type of social media we asked about, how we measured empathy, or participants' age, gender, or education, with one notable exception. Also, those who reported using more social media generally reported more symptoms of narcissism and alexithymia, being out of touch with one's own emotions, 2 traits that often go hand in hand with low empathy." In a similar study by Christopher Terry and Jeff Kane, the emphasis was placed on the importance of empathy within the healthcare system, which also developed similar patterns. Quote, "As with many other aspects of contemporary culture, rapid adoption of social and mobile technologies has altered society's communication patterns and disrupted the expressions of empathy, specifically in digital conversations. Mobile and social media use have transformed how and when individuals interact with each other. The ability to instantly share thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with the rest of society via digital channels can occur in mere seconds, often without the empathetic social filter that accompanies traditional communications. Moreover, digital communications are devoid of many of the emotional signals and cues experienced in face-to-face settings, often leading to more impersonal interactions. While there may be other influences, the online disinhibition effect describes several subtle but powerful underlying factors that contribute to the nature of communication via digital devices. First, the anonymity associated with computer-mediated communication may permit people to possess an alternate online identity and essentially hide behind a non-identifying pseudonym or username. This form of dissociative anonymity allows people to separate themselves from an in-person identity and moral agency, thereby freeing them to express hostility and criticism without any effect to the psyche. Similarly, online users may dissociate those at the other end of the communication by subconsciously viewing them merely as avatars or usernames instead of actual persons. Second, as online communication can be asynchronous, individuals do not have to manage immediate reactions to online conversations and can remove themselves from the repercussions of online discussions, even avoiding ownership for hostile and intimidating comments. Third, even in a completely non-anonymous environment, i.e. computerized medical record, email correspondence, or blog. The nature of online communications is such that individuals are physically invisible to others, permitting them to disregard any type of eye contact or physical reaction of the other persons. A significant portion of traditional face-to-face communications tends to be nonverbal, and without these cues, online conversations lack an essential element of understanding. In the broader world, the loss of empathy is directly tied to the loss of primary socialization and in-person interactions to online spaces. This inability to socialize in more personal spaces creates a disconnect between individuals, which facilitates more extreme behaviors. This has been well documented as a result of anonymity, which Terry and Kane reference, and more widely feeds into the idea of increased online hate speech and radicalization. Another important factor that influences radical perspectives is that of misinformation. Researcher Colin Barton tells the story of a misinformation campaign that took place in Trent, Italy in 1475, known as the Trento Blood Libel, which culminated in the massacre of 15-plus Jewish residents of the area. The story is as follows. A local boy goes missing and the townsfolk, filled with fear and searching for a reason, turn to a preacher who blames a local Jewish community. The people's sentiments turn sour and they attempt to completely run the Jewish inhabitants out of Trent. 15 Jews were found guilty and burned at the stake, while others were run down in the streets, all arising from a falsehood meant to quell fear by placing blame, a sacrificial scapegoat. The fact that nowadays people are relying more heavily on emotion than fact sets up the co-opting of democracy by whatever media sources are able to make the most sensational and emotion-deriving headlines. Barton quotes Paul Levinson, a scholar at Fordham University, who states that this appeal to emotion is also the essence of fake news, which goes on one step further than appeal authority propaganda by making recipients feel that they are now the authorities on the subject by virtue of the false news they have just received about it. In this framework, fake news heavily contributes to the idea of post-truth, wherein media platforms purposefully spread misinformation and misrepresent situations in order to accomplish a goal. Barton is quoted saying, "In the post-truth era, information is harder to trust than ever before. News has become more about entertainment than information, and consumers now subscribe to media in order to have their view reinforced and not challenged. The media environment has become more tribal, defining the people who consume it. On top of this environment, the plague that is fake news has descended upon the internet, making truth a relative concept rather than a scientific one." Barton's post-truth era is the concept of a time period where truth no longer matters as much as it once did, where lies based in reactionary and identity politics carry more weight than truth. Quote, "While using lies for the fermentation of hate and persecution is not a new idea, what are new are the technological methods which lies can be broadcast in the reach of those lies." Social media platforms, then, serve as an accelerant for the diffusion of false narratives and fake news. Self-organizing algorithms make it easier to find similar ideas which reinforce false concepts, clickbait runs rampant as it drives engagement and does better in the algorithm, and journalism is decentralized, meaning that people often get their news from unverified and heavily biased sources. Each consumer has their own personal experience and emotional baggage which affects the way that they perceive information. Partisan media exploits these emotions and experiences by promoting an othering and sharing information in a biased way. Quote, "Alignment towards someone who already holds one's biases and views is the position that partisan media attempts to take, the informed authority. Partisan media makes consumers feel well-informed and emotionally appealed to, as it feeds their biases and validates their views without requiring them to participate in any dialogue or investigation themselves to form their own opinion. Instead, partisan media offers ready-made political views and ideologies that its consumers can subscribe to." The idea that our privacy is being infringed upon is nothing new. Since the Snowden leaks in 2013, we have known that even the government isn't above spying on individuals. Though the methods have evolved over time, the results are still the same. However, there are now new added parameters. Peer-to-peer surveillance, as described by Michel Foucault, is in essence the unconscious reinforcement of normative values by peers through different types of surveillance, whether that be direct surveillance or the appearance of surveillance. In the age of social media especially, Foucault's panopticon has fully realized itself in the concept of forming the individual into the brand and relying on others' opinions to facilitate change, compliance, and conformity within the individual. Through our devices, we lack certain aspects of privacy even now in public spaces where peer-to-peer surveillance becomes less subtle and more active. As Wiseman puts it, as we are broadcast online, we are prodded to claim and conform to different identity brands and signal ourselves as part of different publics. Weisman goes on to talk about the normalization of stalking within online spaces and how it forms the basis for understanding peer-to-peer surveillance in the digital age. He makes reference to the fact that if this act were to occur in a real-life situation, that there would be tremendous backlash and consequence. However, by contrast, peer-to-peer surveillance allows the neighbor to easily monitor anyone for potentially any social deviance that is exposed on the web, with as little effort as typing in someone's name and with zero accountability for doing so. He goes on to reference a work on privacy by Evan Selinger and Woodrow Hartzog, in which they describe the reason that we maintain privacy as being because we live and flourish in huge patches of obscurity, end quote. In other words, the cost of knowing someone is, or rather used to be, much higher than it is now with the integration of media platforms like Instagram and Twitter, where we can discover much more about a person, their interests in their general lives, or at least what they want us to see of their lives, in short order. The cost of knowing someone has dropped drastically, which leads to more behavior such as online stalking, where the consequence and cost is low enough to almost encourage such behavior. Quote, in such a chilling environment, we lose the obscurity afforded to us in our current lives, and in turn we lose the privacy needed to have what privacy scholar Julie Cohen refers to as the breathing room to develop apart from the constant pressures of the world. This in turn causes the curation of appearance both in media platforms and in the real world, as we can always be captured at any moment and plastered upon social media for hundreds, thousands, and even millions to see and ridicule. For me, this is one of the greatest failures of social media. Instead of facilitating uniqueness and sharing genuine moments, we feel this external pressure to conform to social norms in order to gain the approval of the ever-present yet invisible audience. Quote, but if each identity status is attached to a public, if what that identity means is created by a public that subscribes to that identity or claims it, if there are certain opinions that must be held in order to be a part of that public, then one becomes confined by one's public or the combination of one's publics. This is in addition to the greater confines of the public at large, in which each individual public is networked and must be acceptable to and fit within the basic characteristics of the public as a whole. When we form our sense of self in this way, through the selection and combination of publicly approved mass identity statuses, we cannot claim ourselves or have mastery over ourselves. In a sense, we are no longer ourselves. Instead, we are beholden to collective identities. We are forced into a sense of self which the public demands. This is not necessarily a new phenomenon, but our new technologies intensify this pressure and leave little room for escape. The culmination of all these effects results in acute oversocialization, especially in the younger generations. Whereas socialization is the learned process of how we behave in accordance to social norms, oversocialization is the excessive integration of these norms to the point that it inhibits independent thought and action. The individual relies solely on social norms and values in order to exist in very foundational ways such as how to talk, how to dress, what to eat, and etc. This directly hinders autonomy and creativity as their ideologies and ideas are shaped by external factors. Oversocialization emerges where we are engaging with infinitely more information and access than ever before. YouTuber Jules discusses this idea in his video, Gen Z's Unique Oversocialization.
How much do you actually remember? Every bit of celebrity gossip, the news, the comments, the articles, the videos. Most of it we process for like a minute and then it goes from our memory. Even viral things become vague things you remember happening. Sometimes even information that may be interesting to us or seemingly valuable, like a deep dive documentary or something factual, can almost be like intellectual popcorn. Something that while you do digest and eat, it isn't a main course meal and is used to satiate an appetite of engagement under the allure of information. It feels pragmatic to learn, but most of the information in it you will never use in day-to-day knowledge and will forget about just as soon as you've watched it. The algorithm is a constant feedback loop of mostly useless information that will keep you engaged and is designed to keep you engaged. Things that are interesting, that are engaging, but ultimately don't amount to much thought. I'm right now talking about information, but when we talk about media, it takes on an additional role. That of shaping perspective. The content we create and consume isn't merely just a transmission of information, it becomes a lens through which we view the world's issues and people, often tinted by whoever's making it, or in the case of the wider internet, the collective consciousness of the digital community it's in. In traditional socialization, individuals learn from a variety of experiences, including face-to-face interactions, cultural events, and personal challenges. However, for Gen Z, the majority of their socialization occurs through screens. The digital realm becomes a substitute for real-world experiences, shaping their perspectives, values, and even self-identity. Now, it's important to note that obviously people people are still having face-to-face interactions. They're still having cultural events, and I'm sure everyone is still having their own personal challenges. But they often bleed together with technology and media while having them. At events like concerts, music festivals, sporting events, we're constantly filming. We immerse ourselves in what's happening, yes, but we simultaneously view the performance through the lens of our devices, transforming our participation into a blend of direct engagement and mediated documentation of it happening in real time. Often when we're out with friends and we're experiencing life with them, we're showing them things in our lives through our screens, little bits of our life. Our understanding of each other comes not from living with each other, but scraps of perspectives of who they are in certain moments. And with a lot of modern relationships nowadays, while the core tenets of them take place in real life face to face, a significant amount of time in the relationship happens in texting, snaps or calls. It's usually not the core of a relationship, but a lot of the building blocks like getting to know someone, forming inside jokes, setting boundaries and building trust comes from conversing through text rather than in person.
Researcher Jin Xingua draws a similar conclusion about the differences between socialization and oversocialization in his article, saying, quote, "The proper socialization process is to develop one's own unique personality while adapting to the society and can both be used to learn concepts and skills in the process of coping with the challenges of the social environment and be creative to play one's own personality and potential. Oversocialization makes the society lack of vitality and creativity. For example, children are prematurely asked to excel in learning, one-sided emphasis on adolescent obedience, the single model of social success. These are all typical oversocialization environments that can lead to oversocialization." This simultaneous connection and disconnection from the real world hinders people's views of what is real and what is important. As we engage with the developing digital age, culture and trends become matters of opinion and separation more than pillars of unity. We lose critical thinking skills as we fail to learn them in school and feed our minds only procedurally generated content that broadly generalizes and pulls from circles of pseudo-intellectualism. Nowadays, it is almost as if sounding or seeming intelligent is more important than actually being so. So, what can we do? Psychologist Anthony Szilard believes that you must, quote, "get up from your screen and interact with people, especially those with different views. Recall that in the famous Milgram experiment on conformity, the only thing that stopped people from harming another person was when they were in the same room with them," end quote. We can talk to our peers and neighbors and take time away from our devices, yes, but most importantly, we must always engage critically with our surroundings. Since technology doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon, we cannot fully avoid its usage. Instead, we need to be conscious and intentional with our use of media. Richard Paul pushed the idea that when we teach things to the younger generations, we must, quote, "pass on our culture so that students must face the challenge of defining our culture, so that students hear and have to respond to alternative conceptualizations of our culture. Then we cultivate critical thinking and independence as part of our culture." Through this quote, Paul draws a connecting line between more conversational implementations of cultural literacy as a way of passing on and developing critical literacy skills. Social media has removed a limiter as all the information that we see appears as fact, and so we remove the lens of speculation, instead opting to take in as much knowledge as possible. However, this is not generally beneficial, as the wrong information can also get in. If your sense of self is low, then you will allow anything and everything to sway you. Stand for nothing, fall for everything. It is essential to find a balance in the matter so that you may take in what is helpful, even if it is hard, and leave behind what isn't. What isn't good isn't something anyone can determine but you. Whether it be the way things are phrased or the core values themselves, you must learn to vet any and all incoming information. Don't be a drone. Media literacy isn't about showing off your analytical skills. It's about preserving your autonomy. It's about preventing outside forces from dictating your opinions and actions, protecting yourself from potential damage. Don't be fooled. Stay vigilant and question everything. And of course, thanks for watching.